Hey guys, I made 10 really tough FRQ questions for you to try. If you can get all 10 right, you're going to be ready for your AP Econ exam. Pause the video when the question appears, solve it on your own, and then resume and see if you got it right. Make sure you stick around till the end because I threw in a bonus question too. Good luck. Okay, number one, self-correction, 4 different graphs. Pause the video, give it a shot. All right, so macro has a lot of this interconnected graphs. I recommend we use the business cycle, the PPC, the ADAS model, and the Phillips curve to show this one. Start with the business cycle, negative output gap, moving from A to B as the economy can fix itself. Remember, we don't need the government or the central bank to fix these recessions, but it can take longer for the economy to fix itself. It can be more painful. Unemployment can last longer, etc. So we tend to use fiscal or monetary policy responses to make it less painful. Next one, PPC, very simple model, capital goods or consumer goods to really kind of generalize the economy. We're at A, so we've got a lot of excess capacity in the economy. Our factories are still there, our productive capacity is still there. All the people still have all their skills and training. So as the economy fixes itself, lower wages, lower resource prices, we'll move from A to B back out to the frontier on this curve. ADAS model, a little more complexity here. We are at A, that's a negative output gap at Y1. We could be producing at YFE in the long run. That's really our potential output here along LRAS, assuming full employment of labor and resources. And what will happen is lower pressure on prices, wages, and resource prices specifically will shift SRAS outwards. Here's PL2, so we can see we're going to end up with lower price level and more output, and that is a positive short-run aggregate supply shift, again, from lower pressure on downward pressure on wages and resource prices. Last one, Phillips curve. Remember, we had a positive supply shift, short-run aggregate supply shift, so we have an inward shift of the SRPC. It always moves in the opposite way, so we go from A inwards to B along our LRPC curve at the natural rate of unemployment, less inflation, lower price levels, and less unemployment as well. Cool, that's 4 interconnected graphs. Next question. All right, so number 2, just a little formula review for you. I like this question because a lot of students struggle with some of the formulas in macro. This one's important. Pause the video, see if you can figure it out. All right, so the answer to this one is that it's going to be equal to, here's the formula you got to know, and you can use this as your explanation. The real interest rate is equal to the nominal interest rate minus the expected inflation, or factoring in the expected inflation. If you have no inflation happening, there's really nothing to add or subtract from this nominal interest rate. That means real equals nominal. There you go. 3. Terms of trade, not just a comparative advantage, but terms of trade. What will a piece of corn sell for in terms of fruit? Pause the video, give it a shot. All right. So real quick review here. Who's going to make corn? Well, who gives up less fruit to make the corn? And that would either be 1/2 or 3/2. That's going to be 1/2. So the United States is going to make corn. And who's going to make fruit? Well, you know it's going to be Mexico. It's always the opposite. Make sure your math works. Yes, 2/3 is less than 2. So Mexico is making fruit. But the question asks about terms of trade. Here's the trick. You want to compare the domestic opportunity cost for one good. Let's look at corn for the 2 countries. So the domestic opportunity cost for corn in both countries. Any number between those 2 opportunity costs will be in acceptable terms of trade to both countries. So what's a number between 1/2 and 1.5? How about 1? That'll do it. Okay, number 4, kind of a unit 2 type of question. Pause the video, give it a shot. All right, so trick here is don't overthink it. If you want to figure out the real GDP in 2020, you need to use the 2015 prices. Ignore these 2020 prices. Those have been inflated, right? Price levels going up, that's inflation. So just multiply your 2020 quantity by the 2015 price and you'll end up with, 240 and then 80 and another 80. Add those together and $400 is your real GDP. Now, B asks you how much more do people need to get paid in order to kind of be able to buy the same amount of stuff or maintain their same standard of living. Use the deflator formula. That is nominal divided by real multiplied by 100. So 600 divided by 400 times 100, you get 150. That's going to tell you that 50% inflation happened. That's pretty unrealistic amount of inflation for the United States. But if there's 50% inflation, right, that means we're going to need a 50% increase in nominal wages in order to maintain the same level of real wages, the same level of purchasing power, and of course, standard of living. Okay. 5. Now assume fixed nominal interest rates. Pause the video, give it a shot. All right, so who's helped, who's hurt, and why? Firstly, the borrower is definitely helped. It's going to feel easy for them to pay back that loan because of this unexpected inflation. They should be earning more nominal dollars. It's going to feel like they're giving up less. They're going to feel like they got a pretty good deal. The lender doesn't feel so good. They're hurt, right? The money they receive as repayment, assuming that the interest rate is, again, fixed, is not going to be able to purchase as much stuff. In a way, that repayment is worth less. Although it's the same amount of dollars, those dollars have less purchasing power. Now, the retired person is definitely hurt. That's because the money they're receiving on this fixed income pension or Social Security payment, whatever it is, although, of course, Social Security is adjusted for inflation. Let's say it's not. That means they can buy less stuff with each monthly check of whatever, $1,000, right? Inflation's happening. They can buy less stuff. So there you go. Helped is the borrower, hurt is the lender, and hurt is the retired person. All right, next question. Number 6, bank balance sheet question. Pause the video, give it a shot. Okay, question mark values. Well, bank balance sheets must be balanced. 10,000 in liabilities must eventually equal 10,000 in assets, but where does it go? It does not go under excess reserves. We've got $8,500 over here. 0 is your excess reserves amount because they're loaning out all available and permitted deposits. That means excess equals 0. They're only holding on to required reserves, which is 1,000. That means $1,500 goes down here under other. Other could be something like capital owned by the bank. Maybe it's the building that they operate out of, right? So B, the required reserve ratio. Well, we know it's going to be 20% because 1,000 is 20% of 5,000. Their required reserve, that's how much they're holding, that's how much they have to keep, and that is 20% of 5,000. So how do we calculate the money multiplier? Here's your formula. 1 divided by the required reserve ratio. So 1 over 20% or 1 over 1/5, reciprocate, and you get 5. Now, how much new loans can this bank make after the Fed buys $2,500 worth of bonds from them? So the bank is giving up some of these bonds. They're getting back $2,500 worth of money, right? And they can loan out all of that money. They don't have to keep any of this $2,500 because it is not going into demand deposits, going straight to excess reserves and then probably almost immediately being converted into new loans. So maybe you'd see $2,500 in excess reserves and then minus $2,500, which will just pop down here. So we'll end up with $6,500 worth of new loans. The answer to the question, they'll loan out all of it, $2,500. How much new money can be created by this? Well, it's $12,500. How did I do that? I took how much new loans they could make, and through fractional reserve banking, assuming everybody loans out as much as they possibly can, all the banks do, you multiply it by 5, and 5 times 2,500 gives you 12,500. Now, what will happen to the price of previously issued bonds? It's going to increase, and here's why. When this Fed or central bank buys bonds, they're increasing the supply of money, SM2. You can see it here, right? What's that do to the interest rate? Well, it's pushing down the interest rate, IR2. There is an inverse relationship between interest rates and bond prices. If interest rates go down, the price of previously issued bonds go up, probably because they carry a higher relative interest rate. They pay more. Now the interest rate's low, so those old bonds are more attractive to financial investors. D, what's going to happen to the real wages? They're going to fall. This increase in the money supply also increases aggregate demand through interest-sensitive expenditures like consumption and business investment. More inflation means weaker purchasing power, means real wages fall. There you go. Next one. Pause the video. Okay. Let's do it. So we got a recession here, and we know that because current output is much smaller than potential output, 60 versus 100. So we're going to need to spend some money or change some taxes. Use the tax and spending multipliers to solve this problem. The way we solve for the spending multiplier, which is government spending, is 1 divided by the marginal propensity to save. The tax multiplier, which is part B, is MPC, or marginal propensity to consume, divided by the MPS, marginal propensity to save. So that comes from this little sentence here. We give people $100. They're only going to spend $80. So they're going to save 20% of it. That's their marginal propensity to save. So 1 over 20% is 1 over 1/5. So your spending multiplier equals 5. And your tax multiplier, right, which would be 20% divided by 80% basically, and you end up with 4. Your trick there is that the spending multiplier is always 1 bigger than the tax multiplier. I put that down at the bottom. So you just use a little algebra, basic algebra, to solve this problem. We know the gap is 40, right? The gap is $40 billion. So how do we go from 5 for the spending multiplier up to 40 billion? Well, we multiply it by 8. That's how much we got to change government spending. To change taxes and close the gap is actually going to be kind of more expensive for the government because you're only multiplying by 40. So how do you go from 4 to 40? $10 billion. I should note that this is a decrease in taxes by $10 billion. This should be a negative number. Okay, next question. Right, number 8, pause it. Go give it a shot. Okay, almost done here, guys. Number 8, classic crowding out question. I think the easiest way to think about crowding out is that if the government has to increase its deficit spending, it's going to borrow. How is it going to borrow? Well, it's going to demand loanable funds, increase in demand for loanable funds. That drives up the real interest rate. That will decrease the amount of borrowing and private business investment that happens in the economy. That less investment, that lower level of investment could mean slower accumulation of capital stock. That's weaker economic growth, so we're less productive in the long run, less investments made in things like technology and efficiency, things like that. All right, next one. Pause it, give it a shot. Okay, don't get distracted here. Keep it simple. Unemployment rate is just the percentage of people who have a job that are part of the labor force, right? So all we want to concern ourselves with now for the unemployment rate is the people that have a job, that's you're employed, and the people who are unemployed, that's 2, 2, and 1. So our total amount of people in the labor force is 100, and 95 of that 100 have a job. That's a 95% employment rate or a 5% unemployment rate, right? Okay. The labor force participation rate. Now we got to know how many, total population, how much total population we have in this country. We got 200 people in the whole country, right? Not in the labor force, plus, or 100 people that are in the labor force. So 200. Of that 200, 100 are considered in the labor force. So you end up with 50%. Quick review for you here. Who's not in the labor force? This is going to be retired people, children, prisoners, and a big important one, discouraged workers. These are people who don't have a job, want a job, but have quit looking because they just kind of gave up. Discouraged workers actually make the unemployment rate look smaller than what you might say it really is. All right, number 10. Number 10, stick around after this question for the overtime question. I think it's really important for macro that you see that. But number 10 is a Unit 6 question. Pause it, give it a shot. Okay, so capital flight, this is often occurring when we have like turbulence in an economy. It could be something like a revolution or a war or a terrible natural disaster, corruption, whatever it might be. That is going to cause the financial account, right? This is your financial assets. It's going to be moving towards a deficit. Nobody's going to trust that banking system or the guaranteed return or inflation levels, anything like that. It's going to move towards a deficit. And anytime the financial account moves towards a deficit, that means the current account will move towards a surplus. They always move in opposite directions. The effect on the currency exchange rate is it's going to be the result of a double shift here. Now, AP likes to ask whether it's they'll specify how does the supply of dollars shift or how does the demand for dollars shift. It's technically both of these happening at the same time. The way this works is that local people in country X do not want to keep their money in their own banking system. They're going to be supplying their dollars to go get other foreign currencies. That's pushing downwards on the exchange rate, so the currency will depreciate. At the same time that, look, no foreigner really wants to expose their money to this unstable situation, right? All this capital flight occurring. So they're going to demand less dollars. That's an inward or negative demand shift. Both of these things are pushing down on the exchange rate or depreciating the dollar, right? It'll depend on the size of the shifts, whether the quantity of dollars in the foreign exchange market increases or decreases, but they're both pushing down on the exchange rate. Okay. Bonus time, overtime, stick around. This is hard. All right, here it is, overtime. Identify as many shifters or the determinants as you can for all 9 of these lines. These are specific parts of the different graphs that you have to do in macro. There's so much interconnectivity and shifting of lines in macro between the graphs and inside the graphs. I think if you can get these, you'll be in great shape. There's probably more than 20. It kind of depends on how you count them. Pause the video, see how many you can list or kind of come up with in your mind out of those 20-ish that actually exist. All right, let's go through it, starting with aggregate demand. CIGNX, consumer spending, business investment, government spending, net exports. Those are your major shifters of aggregate demand. Short-run aggregate supply is next. That would be RAP, right? Resource prices and inflationary expectations. Actions by the government, that's your taxes and subsidies. Productivity, there's your technology, training, education. Okay, next one, long-run aggregate supply. This is really economic growth. It can be caused by either more or better factors of production, right? So land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship as well, or productivity, technology, education, health. Any of those things is going to make more economic growth happen. So LRAS shifts outwards. Money supply shifters, these are just your tools of the Fed. So open market operations, discount rate, required reserve ratio. Remember, buy bonds, expansionary. Decrease the discount rate is expansionary, and decrease the reserve ratio is expansionary. Money demand shifters, price level. Anytime inflation happens, people are going to want more money. Fintech or financial technology. Any improvement in this is going to decrease sort of the demand for cash. You see lots and lots of payment systems, things like Apple Pay popping up everywhere. That'll decrease the demand for holding cash. And then income. If people are making more money, they're probably going to be spending more money. Remember your formula for the velocity of money. Demand for loanable funds. Any borrowing change from one of these 3 entities, households, businesses, or governments. That tends to be like consumer credit spending, credit cards and the like. Business investment, right? Capital infrastructure and stuff. And then deficit spending from the government. Remember you're crowding out. Loanable funds supply shifters. Any savings changes from either private households or the government. Right? And then the other big one here is financial capital inflow or capital outflow from other countries. Maybe they're being attracted to your higher interest rates and sort of better financial returns. Okay, short run Phillips curve. Here's the trick. I love this trick. Any shift of the SRAS is going to shift the SRPC, but in the opposite direction. Inward SRAS, outward SRPC. Outward SRAS or positive shift, inward SRPC. Long run Phillips curve. Remember, this intersects the x-axis at the natural rate of unemployment. This could change, though, due to stuff like cultural factors. This is maybe a preference for work or leisure or any government incentive change, maybe more unemployment benefits or a longer period of those benefits. There's all of them in one big list. It's almost all of them. There might be a couple that maybe your teacher or your text has specified differently, but that pretty well covers everything. Thank you so much for watching. Now go crush that AP exam. Good luck to you. See you next time.